What's up, everyone? It's the Autistic Scyther here, and this is part 2 of Top 10 Pirates in Video Games. For those looking for where part 1 is, that video has been uploaded to my channel, so if you want to take a look at numbers 10 through 6, I suggest you watch that video first, and then come back to see the remaining 5 entries on this video. Alright, so now that that's taken care of, let's get back into it. Moving on next at number 5, we have Tron Bonne from the Mega Man Legends series. Honestly, the previous 5 entries were all seafaring pirates. Kinda makes sense that we would have to have a sky pirate at least somewhere on this list. And what sky pirate is much more iconic and notable than Tron Bonne? Basically, one of the members of and the brains of the Bonne family of pirates, alongside her older brother Teasel and her baby brother Bonne. And of course, naturally, it kind of makes sense that she serves as a sort of thorn in the side of the main Mega Man of the Mega Man Legends series, Mega Man Volnut, who ended up saving her from a dog when she basically who chased her up a telephone pole. Of course, as a result, Tron ended up, basically getting feelings for Volnut, only she wouldn't full on admit it. Even with that, Tron serves as a Tron and her family serve as a sort of natural enemy, as well as notable where they would head off and find treasures or anything they could steal that they could essentially turn for a profit in order so they could get rich quickly. And this has essentially ended up in some crazy moments, mainly notably seen in the misadventures of Tron Bonne, where Teasel and Bonne ended up getting captured after they ended up defaulting on a loan that Teasel took out that they were unable to pay. And as such, Tron and her serve bots basically head around the island and town, stealing anything that's not nailed down, even the kitchen sink, and selling it in order to make enough money so they could pay off the debt that Teasel had incurred. And of such, even with that, she's even appeared in other games like Marvel vs. Capcom Ultimate, where, naturally of course, at the end of her story, she basically ends up taking a Sentinel bot and repurposing it into a serve bot, which honestly proves that she has a skill with machines, which really does say a lot. That's all I gotta say here. Just something. Moving on next at number 4, we have Edward Kenway from Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. Now, I have never played an Assassin's Creed game in my life, and I really want to play an Assassin's Creed game. That being said, I would be remiss to not put Edward Kenway on a list talking about the 10 best pirates in video games, according to my opinion. And naturally, considering all the other assassins in the Assassin's Creed series, honestly, Edward Kenway's basically your standard pirate, as he's basically a Welsh-born young man and of, well-to-do stock, who basically dreamed of adventure from a young age. And he eventually ended up becoming a part of a pirate crew after not just a failed relationship, but also after running afoul of a sailor who basically was trying to betrays the assassins for the Templars. Of course, that being said, afterwards, he eventually decided to lean full-heartedly into taking the fight to the Templars. Basically, not only facing off against Templar ships, utilizing his own signature ship, the Jackdaw, in naval battles, but also fighting alongside his crew members, utilizing his own fighting style, including wielding dual cutlasses, his trusty blunderbuss pistol, and of course, the assassin-issued hidden blades and rope dart. And even with that, he even has a few notable allies with many of the most iconic and feared pirates of the day, or of the time period, like Stede Bonnet, Mary Read, Anne Bonny, and the legend himself, Blackbeard. Naturally, it kind of fits him as one of the most notable ones. So, yeah, says a lot. Moving on next at number 3, we have Cortez from Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door. And naturally, I didn't know, speaking of feared pirates, I did not know how feared Cortez was, since I don't follow up with most lore. However, that being said, before the events of the entire game, Cortez basically was a notable feared pirate where he not only sailed the 7 seas, but he constantly pillaged the town that would eventually become Rogueport, stealing many of the valuables and treasures from the innocents of the island, and killing many innocent residents as well. Basically, he was more or less a legend. Of course, that being said, he eventually, before his life came to an end, he sailed his ship, the Black Skull, into the Keelhaul Key, parking it in the deepest part of the pirate's grotto, where he essentially protected it with his life. And of course, as such, he even stole the Sapphire Star from the Koopa, who is linked with the titular Thousand Year Door, and basically kept it in his stash. This leads us to the more modern time of the game, where Mario and his partners headed into the cave to Keelhaul Key to find the Sapphire Star, which led them into the pirate's grotto. And were essentially where Cortez attempted to scare them off. Of course, knowing how this is Mario, they keep heading deeper into the grotto. And this leads them to essentially reaching his treasure stores, where Cortez drops all pretenses and fights Mario. And honestly, his battle basically is one of the toughest you'll ever face off in the game. As in his first phase, he fights you with 3 swords and a rusty hook that can poison Mario or his partners if it hits them, which really does say a lot. Of course, if you're able to get past the first phase, he moves on to the second phase, where he takes a more long serpentine form, where he basically either rams Mario or throws a bone at him to hit him or his partner. It was a bone to hit him or his partner. Get past the second phase, and you're basically facing off with the third phase, where he more or less is just reduced to a head. Of course, he fights with his standard weapons without using his arms, or as well as biting Mario. Of course, if you eventually defeat him, he just happily gives you the Sapphire Star. Of course, after you're trapped in the pirate grotto by a disguised Crump. Yeah. Basically, Cortez helps out Mario and his partner, right, and his partners by basically helping them escape from the pirate's grotto utilizing an exit that only he knows about. Kind of proves that there's still some honor in his bones. That's some good thing right there. Moving on next at number 2, we have Vice from Skies of Arcadia. Now, I was not a Sega kid growing up. In fact, I was more or less a Nintendo kid when I was younger. And of course, I never played through the original Skies of Arcadia. Only playing through it recently for the Nintendo GameCube on my phone. And naturally, I'm surprised I never played the game sooner. Especially once you realize that Vice is basically your standard shonen protagonist as a pirate. Since, of course, he's basically a member of the Blue Rogue Sky Pirates, serving underneath his father Dine. Of course, he ends up taking over soon afterwards, and especially alongside his childhood friend Aika. That being said, even when he was younger, he dreamed about sailing out to sea and just finding out what was out there at the end of the other side of the world. This led him to coming across Fina, who is more than she lets on. And of course, it leads him to taking the role of a true hero, not only facing off against the ships of the Empire in naval battles, but also facing off against many other tougher enemies utilizing a lot of his own fighting style, which involves some very powerful and notable moves, including a counter-strike, a skull shield which can protect him and his allies, Cutlass Fury, which is a pretty powerful sword attack, and the extremely powerful Rain of Swords, where he attacks with a rain of blades, dealing damage to all the enemies around him. Honestly, I'm surprised Nintendo hasn't put this game on the Nintendo Switch too. A lot of people need to know about this game. Seriously. Finally, at number 1, we have Queen Michelle from Like a Dragon Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii. Considering how the previous 9 entries were all your standard stereotypical pirate, of course, we had to end this off with a modern pirate. And naturally, Queen Michelle is, well, one of the most modern pirates you'll think of, but at the same time, she's the last one you'd expect to be a pirate. As basically she's an older British woman who basically came into power through many connections she's made due to her high standings and due to her money. And considering how she's the leader of the pirate colony Madlantis in the game, really does say a lot. Granted, honestly, considering how everyone on Madlantis is in it for themselves, yeah, it kind of makes sense he wouldn't make a lot of allies. And naturally, considering everything, yeah, it kind of makes sense what happens to her in the end. Granted, that being said, when I was researching, I really couldn't find that much about her. And in all fairness, it was honestly between her and a certain pirate from Far Cry 3, and yeah, I decided to choose the one that wouldn't, well, get me canceled for saying his name. That's all I gotta say. Those are the top 10 pirates in video games. Like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you all next time!